Salvete! In this lesson, we'll be learning about the second declension. So title your notes, Second Declension. Now, the second declension is just a different pattern of noun endings. Now, we'll say that each and every noun belongs to one and only one declension, and may only use endings from that declension. We'll know which set of declension endings to use by looking at the vocab entry. So for instance, if a vocab entry ends in ae in the genitive singular, we'll have to use first declension endings on it. So for instance, the word puella, puelli, feminine, girl. If, however, the genitive singular in the vocab entry ends with a long letter I, we'll have to use second declension endings for that noun. For example, in the vocab entries deus, dei, masculine, God, or ager, agri, masculine, field, where we have that long I in the genitive singular. So to learn the endings that we'll use for second declension nouns, let's set up a similar chart to the one we did in the first declension, where we have singular on the left, plural on the right, nom, gen, dat, ac, able down the left side for the cases. And now, let's write down the second declension endings. In the nominative singular, we'll see either us or depending on what the vocab entry tells us. So for instance, for the word deus, dei, masculine, God, we'll use us for the nominative singular, while in ager, agri, masculine, field, we'll use er for the nominative singular. The genitive will always be a long I, the dative singular will be o, the accusative singular and then the ablative singular o. In the plural column, it'll go long I for the nominative, orum for the genitive, is for the dative, just like in the first declension, os for the accusative, and then ablative is again. You won't be responsible for any of the long marks in this declension. So let's talk about US nouns. When we decline second declension US nouns, it'll be a very similar process to with our first declension nouns. First, we'll drop us off of the word to get the stem. So what stem would we have for the word deus? If you answered correctly, you said that the stem would be de. It is to this that we'll attach the endings. So then to decline it, we'll simply put it in our chart with deus starting it off, and then see if you can decline the rest of deus on your own, attaching these second declension endings that we just wrote down. Pause and do that now. If you did it correctly, you should have gotten deus, dei, deo, deum, deo, and in the plural, dei, deorum, deis, deos, deis. Let's try it again with another example. This time, let's use the vocab entry gladius, gladii, masculine, sword. First, pause and figure out what the stem is. If you found the stem correctly, you would see that the stem would be gladi by just dropping the us off of gladius. Now, following the steps outlined above, let's see if we can decline it in a chart. So starting with gladius for the nominative singular, pause the video now and see if you can decline this on your own. If you followed the steps correctly, you should have gotten in the singular gladius, gladii, one I from the stem and one I from the ending. So one I from gladi, the other from the ending e. In the dative, gladio. In the accusative, gladium. And in the ablative, gladio. And then once again in the plural, we would get gladii, two I's, one from the stem gladi, one I from the ending I. In the genitive, gladiorum. And then gladiis, once again, two I's, one from the stem, one from the ending. Gladios, gladiis, two I's, one from the stem, one from the ending. Now the last thing to call attention to here is notice in the vocab entry we only had one I for the genitive singular. It says gladius, gladi, one I, masculine, sword. This is because the genitive singular, but only the genitive singular, as I have circled on our chart, may sometimes squish those two I's down to one, giving us gladi, G-L-A-D, long I. But that is the only place in this chart where we may squish them. We cannot squish them in the nominative plural, and we also may not squish them in the dative or the ablative plural. Now the last thing to go over for the second declension is our ER nouns, such as ager, agri, masculine, field, or puer, pueri, masculine, boy. For these nouns, we'll have to follow a slightly different set of instructions. The first thing we'll have to do is, in order to find the stem, we'll have to drop the long I from the genitive singular. See right now if you can drop the long I from the genitive singular to figure out what the stem of each of these nouns is. If you figured out the stems correctly, you should have gotten that the stem of ager is simply agr by dropping I off of agri. Meanwhile, the stem of puer would be puer, P-U-E-R, after dropping the I from pueri. So the vocab entry's genitive tells us what that stem is. It is to this that we'll attach the endings. Let's try that right now with the word ager. So the first thing we'll do is we'll drag the nominative singular straight out of the vocab entry to be ager. Then we'll drag the genitive singular out of the vocab entry to be agri. Finally, we'll use our stem agr for the dative and add an O onto it. Likewise, we would still start from our stem agr and add for the accusative singular. See if you can fill out the rest of this chart on your own by pausing the video. So if you did that correctly, you should have gotten in the singular ager, agri, agro, agrum, agro, and in the plural agri, agrorum, agris, agros, agris. Now that we've taken these notes, let's get those second declension masculine endings onto our best friend as well. So get that out, take it out of the plastic sheet, and let's put those down right now. So in the singular, that'll be us or in the nominative, and then the genitive e, o, and in the plural e, orum, is, os, is. That's it for the second declension. We'll practice this more when we see each other in class. Well, later.